The day was October 21, 2021. And the location, a place called the Bonanza Creek Ranch in Bonanza City, New Mexico.
In a single horrifying moment during what should have been a routine rehearsal for a Western film called Rust, cinematographer Halyna Hutchins was fatally shot.
And the director, Joel Souza, was injured. It was a tragedy that really, it instantly changed the conversation around film safety protocols, and it kicked off years of just incredibly complex and painful legal battles.
Yeah, it really did.
So before we begin our thorough examination of the facts and, the systemic failures and the legal responses to this whole incident, we have to pause. We have to recognize the human cost here.
Absolutely.
Halyna Hutchins was, by all accounts, a brilliant artist. She was a devoted wife and a mother. Her loss is at the absolute center of this discussion, and, well, it provides the necessary gravity for the subject we're exploring.
That is the essential starting point. What we're setting out to do for you, our listener, is to really analyze the extensive collection of sources we have.
Court records, investigation reports.
Exactly. Industry statements, all of it.
Right.
We're going to try to synthesize this really multifaceted narrative and provide a structured understanding of how these individual failures converge with systemic pressures.
And that convergence is what ultimately led to the legal and, I guess, the occupational challenges that followed.
Precisely.
Okay, let's unpack this. We should start with the immediate facts of that afternoon.
The time was approximately 1:46 p.m. Mountain Time. The Rust production was, pretty deep into its shooting schedule. It was day 12.
Right.
And to understand the context, it's really critical to know the nature of the production itself.
So what was that context? I mean, was this a big, major studio production?
Far from it, no. The sources describe Rust as a genuine low-budget Western. It was budgeted somewhere between $6 and $7 million.
Which for a feature film is?
Not a lot. It's not a lot. And it was scheduled for an incredibly rapid 21-day shoot. This pace, this sort of constrained, rapid pace, it's something we're definitely going to return to. It really informs the entire safety culture or lack thereof.
And Alec Baldwin, the lead actor, he was also heavily involved as a producer.
Yes. So the cast and crew, they were rehearsing a key gunfight scene inside a wooden church set.
Rehearsing. So, just to be clear for everyone, this was not actually filming the scene. This was a walkthrough, a blocking rehearsal.
Exactly. They're establishing camera angles, movement. Baldwin was practicing the choreography for his character, which involved him removing a .45 Colt revolver from its holster and pointing it directly toward the camera apparatus.
And who was right there? Who was positioned near that camera?
3 people. Halyna Hutchins, the cinematographer, director Joel Souza, and the B camera operator, Reed Russell. They were all clustered together right behind a monitor.
Focused on the shot.
Completely focused on getting the shot right, and they were situated terrifyingly close. The reports say approximately 2 feet from the muzzle of the firearm.
Wow.
And this is a critical detail. It highlights just a fundamental failure in risk assessment. None of them, not one, were wearing any protective gear whatsoever.
So in that moment, the gun discharges. What happened to the victims?
The firearm, it was a solid frame .45 Colt revolver replica made by a company called Pieta. It discharged a single catastrophic time. The projectile struck Halyna Hutchins in the chest. It traveled through her body, and then it continued and struck Souza in the shoulder. Hutchins was airlifted to the hospital, but she was pronounced dead shortly after she arrived.
And Souza.
He was treated for his injury and thankfully released the following morning. The severity of this outcome, it hinges entirely on one fact. What was fired was not a blank. It was not a dummy round. It was a live projectile.
Which immediately puts the focus on the protocol, the chain of custody for that firearm that so clearly failed just moments before the rehearsal.
Yes, and this failure, it really involves 3 distinct layers of negligence. It starts with the armorer, Hannah Gutierrez Reed. Her job, her responsibility was loading the weapons and placing 3 of them on a prop cart.
And from that cart?
From that cart, Assistant Director David Halls retrieved the fatal Pieta revolver.
Okay, before we even get to the handover, we have to pause on the ammunition itself. The entire safety system in Hollywood relies on correctly identifying and handling 3 specific types of rounds.
It does.
Can we just clarify those distinctions?
Yeah.
Because that error is really the foundation of this whole tragedy.
That's essential context. You're absolutely right. The whole industry practice is built on one absolute rule.
Which is?
Live ammunition is never allowed on a film set. Ever.
So what are the 3 types they do use?
Okay, so the 3 types of rounds you'll typically find are, first, live rounds, which we've mentioned. They have a primer, powder, and a metal projectile. A real bullet. They should never be there.
Right.
Second, you have blanks. Blanks have the primer and the powder, so they create the noise and the muzzle flash, but there's no projectile.
And third are the dummy rounds. And this is where the confusion so often happens in these fatal incidents. Why is that? What makes them so dangerous?
A dummy round is designed purely for realism. It has the casing, it has projectile, but it's supposed to be completely inert. No primer, no powder.
So you use them for close-ups.
Exactly. When the camera needs to see realistic-looking ammunition being loaded or cycled through the gun, the danger, and this is the key, is that visually a dummy round looks almost identical to a live round.
So how do you tell the difference?
The only way is through meticulous, hands-on inspection. You often have to shake the casing to hear if it rattles, which confirms there's no powder, or you visually inspect the primer to confirm it's been deactivated or is missing. The fatal error on the Rust set was that a live round was mistaken for or mixed in with these dummy rounds.
So back to the chain of events. David Halls takes this revolver, which we now know somehow contains a live round, and he hands it to Baldwin. What happens then?
Halls announces, "Cold gun."
Which is the universal declaration.
It is. It's supposed to indicate the firearm contains no live rounds and is safe for everyone. The expectation, the unbreakable rule, is that this pronouncement only happens after a full, thorough inspection of every single chamber in the cylinder.
But Halls later admitted he failed to do that fundamental step.
He did. In his affidavit, he admitted he did not check all the cylinder chambers before handing the weapon over. He recalled seeing 3 rounds in the cylinder before the handover.
And the most damning detail came after the shooting.
Yes. When the gun was retrieved, Halls admitted seeing 4 rounds that were visibly blanks and 1 shell casing that was, well, it was clearly the remains of a discharged round.
The live round.
The live round that had tragically been fired. It just confirms that his initial assumption of cold was based on a reckless, inadequate inspection.
This moves us to maybe the most legally and publicly contested point of this whole story, the trigger pull. Alec Baldwin has consistently and very publicly denied ever pulling the trigger.
He has. He stated his finger was outside the trigger guard.
And this became a central pillar of the criminal case against him.
It did. The investigation brought in the FBI to conduct 2 separate forensic reports. One was in August of 2022 and then a follow-up in August 2023. They were specifically analyzing that Pietta .45 long Colt single-action Army revolver.
And what did the forensic analysis show? I mean, what are the mechanics of that specific weapon?
The reports were conclusive and quite technical. The Pietta single-action Army revolver is mechanically very straightforward. You have to manually cock the hammer.
Right.
The reports determined that the gun could only have been fired by a trigger pull. They meticulously tested all the common scenarios for an accidental discharge, like the hammer slipping from a quarter-cocked or half-cocked or fully cocked position.
Yeah.
And they determined that none of these positions resulted in the gun discharging without the trigger being engaged.
So just to be crystal clear for our listener, this means any potential defense claim of a mechanical malfunction, a defect in the gun, was definitively ruled out by federal investigators.
It was.
It required human interaction with the trigger mechanism.
Precisely. It meant that the final act of discharge wasn't some ghost in the machine or a random mechanical failure. It was a physical action performed by the person holding the gun, even if that action was done, without realizing the immense danger.
So this layered failure, a live round on set, the AD's failure to check, and then the final action of discharge, it really moves us beyond a simple accident.
It does. It moves us into the realm of a profound systemic safety breakdown.
That's a crucial transition. This wasn't just one mistake. It feels like it was the inevitable endpoint of a system that had been eroding long before that gun was ever picked up.
That's a good way to put it.
So we need to zoom out now and look at the cultural context that allowed these 3 layers of failure to stack up on top of each other.
And what's astonishing when you review the sources is the sheer abundance of warning signs. The fatal incident. It wasn't the first time a firearm had discharged unexpectedly on the Rust set.
It was the 3rd, maybe even the 4th time.
That's right. Before the fatal shooting, 2 prop guns had unintentionally discharged on the set, resulting in 3 prior misfires.
Can you just detail that pattern for us? I mean, these are incidents that should have signaled a massive problem.
Well, in one case, Alec Baldwin's own stunt double accidentally fired 2 blanks after he was explicitly told the weapon was cold.
The exact same failure of communication.
The exact same failure. In a separate incident, the film's prop master actually shot herself in the foot with a blank round. These incidents, which occurred just in the days leading up to the tragedy, demonstrated that the verbal safety protocols, that cold gun announcement, were basically meaningless.
And that the physical safety checks were clearly not being enforced.
Not at all.
And the people placed in charge of enforcing these crucial protocols, I mean, they had documented histories that should have raised enormous red flags for the production company. Let's start with the armorer, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed.
Rust was only her second feature film serving as a lead armorer. For a role that carries, life or death responsibility, that level of inexperience it's highly concerning. Yeah. Especially on a rushed set.
And the sources show that her lack of professionalism wasn't a secret?
No, it wasn't. You mentioned an anecdote involving a major actor on her very first film.
Yes. On her first feature, The Old Way, crew members complained about her handling of firearms, citing just general unprofessionalism.
And the most dramatic incident involved the lead actor, Nicolas Cage.
What happened there?
She reportedly discharged a weapon without warning near him. Cage was, by all accounts, furious. He alleged she had, quote, blown his eardrums out, and he subsequently walked off the set.
Wow.
This is clear evidence that her inexperience was resulting in immediate, observable, and dangerous lapses in protocol that were known to the industry before she was even hired for Rust.
Now let's move to the assistant director, David Halls, the man who handed the gun to Baldwin and called it cold. His history is just as troubling, if not more so, when it comes to gun safety.
Halls had a widely documented history of safety complaints across multiple productions. Most notably, in 2019, he was reportedly fired from a film called Freedom's Path after a firearm discharged unexpectedly on set, wounding a crew member.
Through a direct precedent.
A direct precedent. And beyond that single incident, other complaints were raised about his alleged disregard for safety protocols on other projects, things like ignoring fire lanes, blocked exits.
But what's truly damning are the direct warnings that were given about Halls.
Yes. A former colleague from another independent film allegedly issued a very stark warning to that production's leaders saying, and I'm quoting here, "That man is a liability. He's gonna fucking kill someone someday, and you're gonna be responsible."
It's chilling.
It is. Now, to be fair, there are counter-narratives from other colleagues who defended Hall's conscientiousness. But the fact remains that a trail of documented safety incidents and explicit warnings existed, yet he was hired onto a low-budget, high-pressure set as the person responsible for safety coordination.
It speaks volumes about the priority given to safety versus speed and budget.
It does.
It feels like the production just prioritized someone who was cheap and available over someone who was vetted and experienced. And this brings us directly to the atmosphere on set, which was clearly fraught even before the shooting.
Oh, the atmosphere on the Rust set was volatile. It was also happening during a moment of really intense industry union tension. The International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, IATC, was actively mobilizing for a potential strike.
And what were they advocating for?
Better pay and, crucially, safer working conditions.
And Helena Hutchins had shown solidarity with this movement.
She had. She posted online about standing in solidarity with the IATC crew in New Mexico, aligning herself with that movement for better conditions. And this tension, it all culminated in a dramatic action on the very morning of October 21st.
The walkout.
The walkout. 7 unionized camera crew members staged a walkout.
What specifically triggered that? What were their grievances?
They listed multiple things, but they all point back to these cost-cutting pressures. Failure to provide timely payment, inadequate hotel rooms, which led to long, dangerous commutes.
Right.
Poor COVID safety practices, and, perhaps most relevantly, just general gun safety concerns. After they gathered their belongings, they claimed a producer threatened to call the police on them.
And they were replaced.
Immediately. Replaced by non-union, less experienced crew members. This shows a clear adversarial stance by the production against safety concerns when they were raised by the union workers.
And this walkout, it introduces that highly controversial claim about how the live ammunition could have ended up on the set in the first place.
It does.
The idea that it didn't come from the official prop box,
Yeah.
but from unauthorized recreational use.
This is the very contentious narrative that was offered by an anonymous insider. The allegation was that several of the non-union crew members took the prop guns offset that morning to engage in target practice.
Specifically shooting at beer cans.
Specifically shooting at beer cans using live ammunition. The insider claimed the guns were returned after lunch, and it was unclear if they were properly checked. This creates a scenario where a live round could have been introduced onto the set through completely unauthorized, recreational, and just profoundly unprofessional behavior.
And while the Santa Fe County District Attorney's Office initially labeled these claims as unconfirmed, the mere existence of this narrative, it paints a picture of a set where that critical sacred line between recreational gun use and professional prop handling had just been completely obliterated.
Exactly. I mean, if it's true, it means that the production environment was so lax that crew members felt comfortable treating prop firearms like their personal hunting rifles, bringing the most dangerous elements, live rounds, right into the immediate workspace.
But we do have to acknowledge the counter-narrative here, the one that pushes back against this description of total chaos.
Absolutely. There was a letter signed by 25 crew members, including some who were there after the walkout, and they disputed the sensationalized public narrative.
What do they say?
They affirmed that the descriptions of Rust as a chaotic, dangerous, and exploitative workplace were inaccurate. They described the set as professional. They asserted that while, challenges exist on every production, the focus should shift to finding mandatory, modern alternatives to outdated firearm practices.
Which is interesting because it confirms that for many people actually working on the set, the conditions felt normal.
Right.
Which maybe highlights how deeply ingrained certain unsafe shortcuts have become in the low-budget film sector.
That's a very real possibility.
So we have this convergence of known incompetence in key safety roles, a history of prior misfires that were completely ignored, and an adversarial workplace culture centered on speed and budget, all culminating in the fatal incident.
This profound systemic failure, it just set the stage for years of incredibly complex and, frankly, often confusing legal battles.
Following the tragedy, the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office, they launched an immense investigation. They recovered over 600 items of evidence, including the firearm itself.
And the sheer volume of ammunition they found it's just staggering.
What was the number?
Investigators recovered approximately 500 rounds of ammunition, and it encompassed that entire dangerous spectrum we talked about: blanks, dummy rounds, and suspected live rounds.
And critically,
a projectile was successfully recovered from Director Joel Souza's shoulder, which was then confirmed as a suspected live round. That definitively proved the fatal shot was not a mere blank.
So, given that evidence, the paths to criminal charges seemed, at least initially, pretty clear for two key figures.
On January 31st, 2023, the Santa Fe District Attorney charged both Alec Baldwin and the armorer, Anna Gutierrez-Reed, with 1 count each of involuntary manslaughter.
But the assistant director, David Halls, the man who made the cold gun declaration, he secured a plea agreement relatively early on.
He did. He pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of negligent use of a deadly weapon.
And what was his outcome? What was the sentence?
His sentence was 6 months of unsupervised probation, a $500 fine, and community service.
Which, given his documented history and his direct failure to check the weapon, that was seen by many industry observers as surprisingly lenient.
It was.
And beyond the individuals, the production company itself faced serious regulatory action from the state of New Mexico.
Yes, the state's Occupational Health and Safety Bureau, OSHA, they imposed a significant fine on Rust movie productions. It was initially $136,793, but it was later reduced to $100,000 after a settlement.
And this fine was explicitly tied to systemic firearm safety failures.
Explicitly. The regulators specifically pointed out that Halls, in his dual role as AD and safety coordinator, failed to consult weapons specialists before or after loading. They highlighted that he had personally witnessed 2 of the prior accidental discharges but took absolutely no corrective action.
Underscoring that the failure was institutional, not just a momentary lapse.
Exactly.
So Hannah Gutierrez-Reed's case, it proceeded first, but it was complicated by charges beyond just the shooting itself.
It was. She faced a pretty unusual second charge related to evidence tampering.
What was that about?
Well, in June of 2023, prosecutors added a charge alleging she attempted to conceal evidence. Specifically, they claimed she tried to transfer a small bag of cocaine to another person on the night of the shooting, right after her initial police interview.
With the intent to obstruct justice.
That was the allegation. It added this whole other layer of potential unprofessionalism and criminality that was entirely separate from the handling of the prop gun.
So her trial began in early 2024. What did the jury finally determine on both of those charges?
The trial ran from February into March of 2024. and the jury came back with a mixed verdict. They found her guilty of involuntary manslaughter,
But not the other charge.
but they acquitted her of the evidence tampering charge. The implication was that while they found her conduct was reckless enough to have caused the death, they didn't believe the prosecution had proved she tried to obstruct justice by concealing narcotics.
And what was her final sentence?
She received the maximum sentence, 18 months in prison on April 15, 2024. She served her time and was released on May 23, 2025.
And her parole conditions are quite strict.
Very strict. Electronic monitoring, she's prohibited from owning firearms, mandatory mental health assessment, and she is strictly barred from any contact with Helena Hutchins' family. Her conviction established that her negligence, it crossed the threshold into criminal culpability.
Her case stands in such sharp contrast to the protracted, convoluted legal path of Alec Baldwin.
It really does. Baldwin's criminal case was just defined by constant shifts and evidentiary battles. It demonstrates the monumental difficulty the state faced in trying to prove criminal negligence against the lead actor and producer.
He initially pleaded not guilty to the involuntary manslaughter charges in January 2023, only to see those charges drop just a few months later.
Right. In April 2023, the charges were temporarily dropped. The prosecutors claimed they needed more time to investigate whether the firearm had been modified, which might have supported a defense of mechanical failure.
But they immediately signaled they planned to refile.
They did, and that refiling happened in January of 2024. He was reindicted on involuntary manslaughter charges, and he again pleaded not guilty.
His trial finally got underway in July 2024, but it was over almost as soon as it began. It was derailed by a surprise motion to dismiss.
It was an incredible legal shockwave. Right after opening statements, Baldwin's defense team filed a motion alleging a catastrophic procedural failure by the prosecution, a Brady disclosure violation.
Okay, this is a moment where we really need to delve into the legal nuance for our audience.
Yeah.
A Brady violation is the key to understanding this dismissal. What exactly did the judge find that the authorities had intentionally withheld?
A Brady violation means the prosecution failed its constitutional duty to disclose evidence that is favorable or material to the defense. In this case, the defense alleged that authorities had failed to disclose a supplemental police report about a set of bullets found on the set. And crucially, these specific bullets had been submitted to authorities but were mistakenly filed under a separate case number, and the investigating authorities had internally decided they had, quote, no evidentiary value in the Hutchins case.
But the defense argued that those bullets were actually highly relevant to their narrative. Why?
Well, the defense needed to demonstrate confusion, poor procedure, and multiple potential sources for the live ammunition. They wanted to argue that Baldwin could not possibly have known a live round was in that gun.
So evidence of other live rounds found and mishandled by authorities.
Exactly. Even if they weren't the fatal bullet, it would support the defense's claim that the set environment was chaotic and that the investigation itself was flawed in determining the origin of the fatal bullet. By hiding this material, the prosecution obstructed the defense's ability to prepare its case.
And the judge, Mary Marlowe Summer, she used remarkably strong language when she ruled on this violation.
The language was devastating for the prosecution. She found that the authorities' willful withholding of this information was intentional and deliberate. She went on to state that if this conduct does not rise to the level of bad faith, it certainly comes so near to bad faith as to show signs of scorching prejudice.
Scorching prejudice. That indicates extreme judicial disapproval of the prosecution's methods.
It's about as strong as it gets.
And the consequence of that finding was immediate and absolute.
The judge dismissed the case with prejudice on July 12, 2024. For our listeners, with prejudice is the legal equivalent of a permanent bar. It means those exact involuntary manslaughter charges related to the Rust incident can never be brought against Alec Baldwin again by the state of New Mexico.
And the prosecution's appeals failed.
They tried to appeal, the judge upheld the dismissal, and the prosecutor ultimately withdrew her second appeal in December 2024. That officially ended the criminal chapter for Alec Baldwin.
So we have the armorer criminally convicted and imprisoned, and the lead actor-producer free acquitted not on the merits of his actions, but because of prosecutorial misconduct. The question of liability remains intense, but it transitions fully now into the civil realm.
Yes, the dismissal of the criminal case against Baldwin just shifted the entire focus to civil court, where the burden of proof is lower. It's focused on negligence and financial damages, not criminal intent.
And Helena Hutchins' family remains central to this ongoing civil litigation.
They do. While her widower, Matthew Hutchins, settled his wrongful death suit with Baldwin and the production back in October 2022. a settlement that included him becoming an executive producer on the eventual film completion.
Which was a surprising development.
It was. But Hutchins's parents and sister, they filed a separate negligence lawsuit. Their lawyers vowed to continue their litigation against Baldwin, arguing that his role as a producer made him ultimately liable for the safety failures. Baldwin was formally required to be deposed in March 2025 as part of these proceedings.
And many crew members also pursued civil action, right?
Several suits were filed. Serge Svetnoy, the gaffer who was nearby when the incident occurred, sued for negligence and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Script supervisor Mamie Mitchell also sued, and she pointed out a crucial detail. That the script didn't even call for the actual discharge of a firearm in that scene, only a movement, which further highlights the recklessness involved in even loading the weapon with anything other than an inert dummy.
And the legal battles even saw Baldwin playing offense against the state officials.
He did. In January 2025, Baldwin initiated a civil rights lawsuit against the Santa Fe district attorney and other officials, claiming wrongful prosecution for manslaughter. While that suit was initially dismissed, it was reinstated and subsequently moved to federal court, which just demonstrates his determination to challenge the entire legal process he endured.
And finally, the search for the source of the live rounds that spurred yet another civil suit, this time against Baldwin.
That's right. Seth Kenney, the rust prop supplier who the armorer had initially accused of introducing the live rounds in a prop box, a claim he strongly denied, he filed his own lawsuit against Baldwin and the production in October 2025, alleging defamation.
The sheer scope of all this litigation, it underscores how fragmented the responsibility for the failure was, making resolution through a single criminal conviction nearly impossible.
It really does.
So moving away from the courtroom, the Rust tragedy forced Hollywood to confront some long-held safety traditions, specifically around the use of real weapons. And this conversation instantly brought up a historical parallel.
It did. The incident immediately drew these painful comparisons to the 1993 death of actor Brandon Lee on the set of The Crow.
How similar were the circumstances?
Shockingly similar. Lee was killed by a projectile that was lodged in the barrel of the prop gun and was then propelled out by a blank round. It was a similar tragic accident stemming from prop gun mismanagement.
And Brandon Lee's sister, Shannon Lee, she became a highly visible advocate after the Rust shooting, calling for wholesale change.
Her core message, and really the message of many within the technical crews, was that in the modern era, the continued use of real firearms it's medically and technologically obsolete.
So what was she calling for?
She called for mandatory gun safety training and, critically, a drastic reduction in the use of real guns, arguing that modern CGI and special effects technology make them completely unnecessary for visual effect.
And she wasn't alone.
No. Cinematographer Bill Dill, who was actually a mentor to Lena Hutchins at the American Film Institute, he echoed this. He called the reliance on real guns with blanks in them archaic.
And this push for technological replacement, it resulted in some immediate policy shifts across parts of the industry.
We saw several major productions take preemptive action. Alexi Hawley, the showrunner of ABC's police procedural The Rookie, announced a clear, immediate policy banning all live gunfire on his set.
So what did they use instead?
They decided to use airsoft guns or other inert props and just rely solely on CGI to add the muzzle flashes and digital effects in post-production. Furthermore, Rupert Sanders, the director of the reboot of The Crow, the very film that suffered the Lee tragedy, he also banned all real guns from his set.
But not everyone in the industry agreed with banning real firearms outright. Some argued the fault lies entirely with procedure, not the tool itself.
And this is the critical counter-argument. Firearms safety experts like Dave Brown, representing those who work closely with real props, they contended that these tragedies are not the fault of the firearms themselves.
But what then?
But the result of a cavalier attitude towards safety. He asserted that when handled responsibly and meticulously, real firearms are safe. The solution, in his view, isn't technological replacement, but fanatical adherence to the absolute rules.
Guns must be checked every single time they change hands.
Every single time. And live ammunition must be banned from the property entirely. For this camp, banning real guns is treating the symptom, while the disease is poor training and corner cutting.
That distinction protocol versus technology, it's fundamental to the future of set safety. And regardless of the solution, the underlying economic pressures also have to be addressed.
Yes. The discussion continually circles back to the budget. Many industry insiders viewed Hutchins' death not as some freak accident, but as an indictment of a production model that rewards corners being cut.
The gaffer, Serge Svetnoy, who was right there in the incident, he was highly critical of the producer's motivations.
He was. Svetnoy specifically attributed Hutchins' death to negligence and unprofessionalism in a public statement. He targeted producers who, in his words, attempt to save a dime by hiring unqualified or inexperienced people for complex and dangerous jobs.
Which connects directly back to the documented history of David Halls and the limited experience of Hannah Gutierrez-Reed.
Exactly. When vetting is inadequate and qualifications are compromised for cost, the danger increases exponentially.
This sounds like a fundamental ethical problem in low-budget, fast-paced filmmaking.
It is the core systemic problem identified by union leaders. Michael Miller, the vice president of IATs, he articulated the danger very clearly, stating that too often, the rush to complete productions and the cutting of corners puts safety on the back burner and puts crew members at risk.
And the low budget of Rust dictated that rapid 21-day schedule.
Which in turn put pressure on everyone. That pressure led to the hiring of cheaper, potentially less qualified crew, and it incentivized shortcuts like the failure to properly check the chambers of the gun. The financial constraint acted as a cultural incubator for negligence.
It's a powerful argument. The economic reality of a low-budget schedule aimed at minimizing costs and maximizing speed compromised every single layer of safety protocol, resulting in the most severe penalty imaginable.
So when we look at this extensive body of evidence, from the forensics on the Pieta revolver to the documented history of incompetence in key personnel, the Rust tragedy is revealed as a fatal convergence.
A perfect storm.
It was a perfect storm where individual negligence, systemic safety shortcomings, and the severe economic demands of a rush production model all combined to create an environment where the loss of Halyna Hutchins was tragically predictable. The complexity of the subsequent legal battles, particularly the collapse of the major criminal case on technical grounds, only underscores how difficult it is to affix final accountability for a systemic failure.
And that's where we have to leave you with a final question for reflection. If low-budget filmmaking inherently incentivizes shortcuts and negligence, and if the complexity of the legal system, as demonstrated by that Brady violation, makes individual criminal convictions almost impossible against high-profile producers, what accountability structure is truly left? Is the threat of massive civil liability, the financial risk to the producer's own pocketbooks, now the only true safety mechanism that will force Hollywood to prioritize crew safety above production deadlines? It's a difficult question that the industry will be answering, not in courtrooms, but through its budgets, for years to come. Thanks for listening.